from the bottom of the paragraph, page 15, right after the parentheses. Amnam. See that? Gam ba'avoda bebechinas shiflus hanal. Also, the avoda of making yourself feel lowly, the avoda of marirus, of bitterness. Imayos shebederek klal hu inyan bittul hayesh. Even though the whole avoda to begin with is that you're bittling your yesh, you're making yourself realize how lowly and lacking of qualities you are. So it's not like avoda of simcha where you're sort of feeling excited and good about yourself and it creates a warm, fuzzy feeling inside. This is in general bringing you to tears. This could also unfortunately have yeshus slipped into it. And that's the idea that you feel yourself even at the moment of the bitterness and the lowliness. And therefore, it's not a true emptiness and a true lowliness of your position where you actually create a sense of like nothingness, that, like we said, like this concept of chokhmah, that you become like an entity which is a non-entity and therefore just a placeholder. Die Zubrechenkeit is nit keine Missis, als bei sich sein Gernit beemes verlaren, sich legamre kol v'kol. So he says the brokenness is not really true because you've not really sort of removed yourself entirely. And that is why, turning the page, because the what do you call cheshbon nefesh? Sorry, I'm losing my thing here. What's the translation of cheshbon nefesh?
The accounting of the soul.
Yes, thank you. Your soul accounting. And why is that? Very simple, right? Because you can think about all the things you did wrong, but it doesn't really affect you, right? This is very, very common. In other words, even when you're going to start to realize and rack up all the things that are problematic, you really don't care. And that's a tremendous level of yeshus that you're looking at it, right? I just dealing with like somehow I got into some marriage counseling over the years, and I'm dealing with unfortunately like a very broken situation, and the guy knows all the years that like he hasn't been putting in his dues, and he's just letting her down, and like we've been talking about it the whole time, and while it's happening, I'm just thinking how to relate to this. Don't mean to bring anyone into a bad mood, but it's like he knew he was doing something wrong. He didn't really care. He was just kind of. And our relationship with Hashem is very much like a marriage. You can just let down your partner. You know you're letting them down. You know it's wrong, but you kind of feel like my check might never come. You know what I'm saying? It's after a while, it shows up. It's like, where's the avoda? Because whenever you're doing your cheshbon nefesh, your calculation, it didn't bother you that much that you weren't. There's nothing that you were subpar. And so even when you're going to do this avoda, we see that you can still maintain like a sense of self and yeshus in the middle of it all. If it really mattered to you and it touched your soul, you would like be broken into tears, and it would tear you to pieces that you've like sacrificed and ruined everything that you're shooting for. It would literally negate you. Right? So in other words, you can still be in the process of looking like you're doing the work and raising up all of your, like your accountant sheet is all there, just like at the end of the day, you don't really care. But when it doesn't bother you that much, then obviously it's not going to do its job of like negating you and bittling you, which is its whole point. And believe it or not, even when you're busy thinking about how crummy you are and how like lacking your avoda is, you could even harbor inside of yourself a certain level of arrogance and joy, which I think also was happening in this case. Almost like you're getting away with it. You know what I mean? And you look at yourself almost like laughing at the list of subpar behavior. Right? And basically, you're saying like, okay, but I'm doing so much service anyway. In other words, you don't really take it seriously because you're like somewhat still cocky and confident of how much you are doing. And even though that's not like necessarily you're wearing it on your sleeve, that like little tinge of joy of your situation, even though it's a very lowly situation, you're not really broken over it. It's still sitting there because you are essentially a yesh. So no matter how much you're going to sort of like beat the dog, he's not. He still just like feels justified in his behaviors. He's gonna poop on your rug all over again because like that's what makes him happy. Shenishar kayim adayin, because that sense of essential self is sitting there, and what you could do to uproot it, even in the process of doing it yourself, it's so rooted in you, the sense of like self-justification and pride, that even the avoda of like staring right at it and calling it out, you just kind of laugh at it, right? And you throw like a sort of like a monkey wrench in the whole thing. Because this whole difficult work, which is supposed to break you, when you're like, when it's underlined by this sense of yeshis, right? It doesn't wind up saving you. And refining your attributes, your characteristics. It doesn't raise up your level of Torah mitzvahs as it needs to be, because again, even in the avoda, you're sort of secretly harboring a sense of self-justification. V'zos hanesiba sha'im hayosu oved havaya mikom makom liyosh avoda enu kedaboy l'mahave b'chinis bitul ki im b'chinis yeshu murgash anal. And this is all because, really, even though you're busy serving God, it's not really working for you. And it's because the avoda is not being done properly. It's not being done with a bittul. You're holding on to your yesh. The whole purpose of the avoda is to create a sense of bittul. And we're seeing that you can, both with simcha and marirus, like, which is like essentially the two prongs of avoda, you can sort of throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing because you're not approaching it with the proper level of bittul. V'lazos eino yechol lizbol es chavedo. And because of that essential yesh, we're going back to the basic problem, which is why the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. That is what keeps you, that sense of yesh is what keeps you from connecting with your friend and even being able to handle his existence. Because your friend is also holding in some status of avoda. And therefore he's like comparable to you. He's like a competitor on the stage, right? Because your avoda is not ultimately true, because you're almost like trying to make a trophy out of yourself. Like here, it's almost like, look at my avoda. Because the real avoda is in order to get the I removed. But you're busy doing the avoda, and the I is so like deeply rooted in you that you're almost like, the avoda is almost making you prouder, right? And so therefore, because you have that little stick inside of you, when you see someone else who's also doing the avoda, and he becomes your competitor, because you're not really in it for the true reason of sort of making yourself go away. You're actually building yourself up. And therefore someone else who can threaten you, because he's mimayit hayeshu shalo. He minimizes your self-importance. In other words, it's such a silly thing. You're trying to humble yourself, and you're like, well, this guy's also trying to humble himself, and therefore maybe he's going to humble himself more than me. So it's like such an arrogant approach, right? The whole purpose is you're trying to be humble, and really you're like competing with the other guy's attempt at humility, because his humility makes your humility look less, right? And because of that, he is no service of you, and you're no service to him in going further in this avoda. Because instead of coming together and like sort of, discussing this issue, he becomes someone who is repulsive to you because you can't stand how he makes you feel about yourself. He lessens yours because he's like a competitor. V'soneoso, and you wind up hating him, right? He's like and therefore you need him to go away in order for you to feel good about yourself, and therefore you start amplifying and showing to the eyes of everybody how lowly he is, and how he's not good, and you like break down his attempts at service, that he's really full of himself and he's making all kinds of wrong decisions, and the real reason is because of you. And that's also so that people shouldn't compare him to you, because you're afraid if they compare him to you, it's going to shine the spotlight on your own sense of self. Gam she'en nogei elav, hainu ma sheyidmo elav, o yizgad elav, ki im shemitzad ha'yeshu shelo, in yichol lizbo mailas zulaso. And you can go further than that. So one is that you don't want anyone to compare him to you, right? Or he shouldn't be greater than you. O gam she'en nogei elav, or maybe you could say, it's not really relevant to you, mashiyid me'elav, that they're going to compare him or he's going to be greater than you, but rather, it's just simply because of your yeshus, you just can't stand that he's great. It doesn't matter if his greatness is in comparison in relationship to you. That's one level that he makes you feel smaller about yourself. The other is that you just can't stand him, period. Therefore you hate him, and you lower him and you embarrass him. Disgrace him, and you can't speak to him peacefully, and you can't link with him up on any projects because like his basic presence is just offensive to you. Specifically, if you actually do find in him some kind of a great quality, wow, this guy's really like brilliant, right? Or he's extremely careful about his mitzvahs, about his purity. He doesn't put anything into his mouth, and you must realize that he's actually a shining example of a Jew. Then yichos v'yiktsof ma'od shein yichol zos lisno klal. Then that even angers you more because basically it just lowers your sense of self. It's like an attack. This man's greatness is somehow an attack on you, and it creates even a further hatred that you just can't bear him at all. And in this, all of a sudden gets thrown in this dirty word called jealousy, right? That you start to be in a state of jealousy with him, and it says that jealousy, right? Kasha kishol kina. It's worse than hell. Anyone ever been jealous before? Right? You don't want to try it. I can speak from personal experience, right? You can be jealous of Torah. We're going to speak about that. But if you get into a situation in your life, I've lived a few years of life, you wind up getting in a jealous relationship. It literally is worse than hell. It's all arrogance. You're basically just like, and because you're arrogance, the other person is just in unavoidable, like he lives in your head. He should charge you rent, right? And what happens is it brings you down. It says that kina is one of the things that's listed in the Mishnah that takes a person out of the world. It can literally kill you, right? It's a very dangerous thing, and it's all based on this overinflated sense of self. If you were bittul and you were like really into the avoda and you were doing it l'shem shamayim for Hashem, another person's greatness would actually be welcomed, right? Because the more avoda, the better. We're here to serve God. We're here to make a mishkan. You want to bring the krushim and the boards, let the other guy bring the urios and the curtains, and like you can pair up. But if you're thinking that like it's my boards, right? This is my part of the mishkan, then the other person's greatness, you don't want him to bring it to the table. And you know what happens? The mishkan doesn't get built. As we said before, like, but the fallout from this is horrible, because here you have these two chachamim fighting over something, and the loss goes to the community. The loss goes to the holy thing that needs to be built, and the kehila, whatever. They're the ones that suffers the actual service and the need for God to be present in the world. And he says this type of thing called jealousy is also higam kem bichlal sinas chinam. This is also in the category of what we call sinas chinam. In other words, they're synonymous. Shari lo asa lo ma'uma v'lo lakach mishalo, because the person that you're jealous of really did not take anything from you. He didn't do anything to you. He's just rising himself up. His star is rising. And really, your star could rise too. He's not stopping you from being great, right? You're just stuck on the fact that the greater he rises, people are going to see him and appreciate him. And what about me? So it's all, and you could do your own avoda. It's nothing stopping you, right? So this is also in the realm of sinas chinam. There's no reason for you to cast your eyes in that direction and be and distance yourself from that person. So you see, it's all about this inner yeshus that one holds on to. He's not holding you back. But Cain, gam akina bagashmias shemakana hatzlachaso. The same is true when it comes to being jealous of someone else's gashmias, their stuff, right? Their bank account. V'rov ashro and his great wealth. Halo lo kach es shelo. Right? People, you see this all the time. People get upset that another guy has more than them. He didn't take yours to make it to raise his fortunes, right? Birchas Hashem hi tashir, right? It's the blessing of Hashem that makes a person rich. It has nothing to do with him taking something from you. So you're feeling like an aversion towards him because of his greatness. It's all because of your overinflated sense of self. V'kiyadua desina machmeskina ein la takana. That's kind of like a horrible klal, that hatred due to jealousy cannot be fixed, right? It's a poison. It's an evil that can exist. And as it says in the Mishnah, there's 3 things that take a person that mamash out of the world, and kina is one of them. So when it says it can't be fixed, I mean obviously it can be fixed, but only it can't be fixed like by you doing anything about it. You can't. That's what I say. You might as well charge rent in your head if you don't minimize your yeshus and realize that this whole issue is with you, and you have to just change your entire approach. It will never go away, right? If you hate someone due to jealousy, it will never go away, and based on anything that person and is going to happen in your relationship with that person, they can't fix it. The only person that can fix it is yourself by taking the pill, the bittul pill. Tov, tes vav. Hagam sheish ma'ila be'inyan akina beruchnius. Now, someone mentioned, what about being jealous for another person's Torah? There, we actually say it happens, and it's actually could be positive, right? As it says, kina sofrim tar bechochma, that when you have 2 sages that are jealous of each other's wisdom, this actually increases the wisdom in the world. Right? Because the fact is that this guy, like, you're like, wow, he's already got his smicha, I'm going to get my smicha. So good, now you get 2 rabbis, right? So like when they're jealous over each other's, it's like a healthy competition. It's not necessarily based on a yeshus, or this in a certain sense is how you could transform this incorrectable jealousy to something positive. You could turn it towards a healthy spiritual jealousy, which is, by the way, no less painful. It's just you can utilize it for something good. Jealousy is a human emotion, which is probably the most targeted, intense level of like pain that a person can feel. It says worse than death, worse than hell. Death is already better than hell, right? Because the Isa Midrash Rabbah on the pasuk, it says that Rachel was jealous of her sister, right? It says it straight up. Shekinasa, and we're talking about tzaddikim, right? So they don't have yeshus. So that is a type of like holy jealousy. And what was she jealous of? Shekinasa b'ma'aseh hatovim. She was jealous of her good deeds. Leah was just off the charts, perfect. And Rachel realized that she was being blessed for her perfection with children. And this like caused Rachel to go deeper into her own perfection, because she knows that there is reward and punishment. And if you raise up your level of divine service, Hashem answers the call. And so this Hashem almost created a situation of jealousy so Rachel could meet her true purpose in life and be pained over the lack of children and so to speak, do something about it, elevate herself. There's no more greater motivating factor than jealousy. So on the side of Kedusha, as difficult as it is, there's nothing that can raise you up faster and more pointedly than really feeling in your gut that someone else is achieving greatness and you could too, right? As it says, Al yikane libecha bechatayim kim beyiras Hashem. You shouldn't be jealous in your heart over sins, but rather over the fear of God. And in this capacity, the jealousy comes because you strongly desire the good deeds. Like you want to be serving Hashem in such a splendid way. Or you want to achieve this unbelievable mind that you see on your fellow, and just like it's clear and lucid, and like you want it. You want to see things that clearly. You want to understand things so deeply. It's not necessarily an evil trait at this point. It becomes something in the godly soul, which is extremely powerful and potent. Therefore, your jealousy expressed itself on someone who has tremendous wisdom or tremendous good deeds. This affects you to take it up a notch until you also reach such a level. And why is this so effective, so to speak? Because as we've been saying, jealousy reaches the depths of a person's soul, right? There's something about it. It's almost like reminiscent of the sphere of Netzach, right? When a person, we have different attributes. You have the attribute of love, you have the attribute of fear, like you can feel these things. You also have the attribute of Netzach. What does Netzach mean? The need to win, right? And it's mamash, a base human emotion that you have, and it's the kind of thing where the greater the opponent, the more your Netzach comes out, because in other words, if someone beats you, then you have not utilized your midah of Netzach, right? It's gone into a state of concealment. Just like your love could go in a state of concealment. Someone could lose their passion for life. Someone could become, right? So you have emotions that could either express or not express. When it comes to Netzach, the only way it expresses itself is if you win. You constantly have to win. So the greater the opponent, that's like the test on your midah of Netzach, right? Because is the other person's Netzach going to like outdo yours, or are you going to raise up to a level of like really going to the depths of your soul and pulling out the most intense level of Netzach? And that's actually what shows on the greatest persons. Like the king, by definition, has the most like powerful state of Netzach, because that's why he's the king. No one ever beats him. If they beat him, he's not the king anymore. Right? So it's like our state of like true malchus and like total greatness in life is actually a commensurate with our Netzach, and it's very similar to this. The Netzach therefore goes to the depths of your soul, because ultimately you have to go to places that you never knew before if you're really going to pull out a victory. Right? It's like you see these like world champions, like how do they do that again? He just won like another Super Bowl? Like dude, like no one's ever done it before. How did you find the strength? Like your back was against the wall, you had no chance, it was like 20 seconds left to score the final touchdown, and you pulled it out, right? Because it's not luck, right? It's like this intense level of panemius essence of yourself, of needing to win and promoting it. And it's the same thing, but the jealousy basically reaches into. Like, I have to rise to a greater level, and so it goes to the depths of your soul to find that inside of you, right? So in that regard, painful as it might be, it's extremely positive. It's something that could be very powerful. Again, if it's for the wrong things, if it's like not l'shem shamayim, this is the depths of your Yetzer Hara. It's essential Yeshus. Why do you want to win? Just because you want to be better, not because you want a greater level of divine service to be in place, and you're probing the depths of godliness. You're probing the depths of Yeshus. Right? And so that's why on the alternative side, it's worse than hell. Because the deeper you go, it can't be fixed. You just go deeper and deeper into your own sense of like self-pride, and that's very dangerous, obviously. Avoid jealousy, therefore. And therefore, as I was just saying, it reveals the hidden powers, right? Which would not surface unless there was this opponent and this challenge, right? Unless we're challenged, we don't find the secret treasures inside of ourselves. And to the point that really jealousy can reach you to the highest heights, the jealousy of Kedusha. So there's basically these two powers, right? What we call Ur Yosher and Ur Choser. Is everyone familiar with this terminology? So what is the basic meaning of these things? The straight light and the returning light. What does it mean? How do we define those things? Okay, so let's just make a little analogy to make it a little bit simpler to understand. Let's say a rabbi comes in to teach a class, and he's prepared the lesson. Okay, and everything he's got to say, he's already come into the room with it, right? So he's got like Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. That's called Ur Yashar, because it's a light which is, so to speak, coming from above to below, where he's preparing to shine what is available that he's already has at the ready, and he's bringing it to you, right? When all of a sudden the student asks a question that he did not prepare. So this is what we call a reflecting light, right? Because he shined that Ur Yashar onto the Kli. If the Kli would have just accepted it, he would have just elicited the Ur Yashar, and that's it. But when the Kli, it doesn't go into the Kli, and on the contrary, the Kli basically challenges it, so it returns to him, as it were, and he has to now go higher into a state which he did not yet prepare. If someone presents a question, he didn't prepare that. If he's going to come up with the answer, it's something that was beyond the lesson plan, right? And in order to get to that, he has to go to something which is not at the ready, right? He may in fact be able to answer it, but he's going to have to suddenly think deeply and probe into his inner self in a way that he clearly did not have to do when he prepared the class. When he prepared the class, he thought he understood the conversation, he understood the topic, and he was ready to tell everybody what he knew. When all of a sudden it got discovered that there was a piece that was not clear, and all of a sudden, if it was clear to him, he would have said it. So it's obviously not clear to him either. So it's like a returning light, meaning, there's another important part about the Or Yashar and the Or Choser, is the Or Yashar starts from a fixed point, and it goes to the bottom. The Or Choser, when it goes back up. And when it comes to go back up, there's no fixed point to where it's going because the depths go on forever, right? When God is, so to speak, giving to the world, it ends at the world. But when we somehow reflect this light, we don't understand. I'm puzzled, Hashem. Can you explain this to me deeper? For example, there's a generation of Jews that aren't catching on to divine service because whatever the Torah that they have is not catching them. So the leader of that generation has to come up with something which is going to stimulate his generation to go deeper. He's like, you know what? You guys need Chassidus. It's not working anymore. I got to produce something which is going to actually get your attention and make even you lowly people serve God. So the idea is that from the reflecting light, it goes and finds deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into Hashem, which there is no upper limit, right? Because Hashem goes on forever. And therefore the Or Choser in principle has a much, much deeper and more powerful pool of godliness than the Or Yashar, which starts off with basically everything prepared, a finite level of light that you're trying to distribute. Am I making this clear? I'm looking at a lot of blank faces for some reason. I think we need some Or Choser.
This is your class. This is your teaching style.
What do you mean?
Because you have a yashar, a plan,
right?
And then people ask questions, and you go off into whatever questions.
Okay, so alavai. So the point is that this is what's happening at that moment. That's why, by the way, it says, I learn much from my teachers, even more from my chaverim, and mitalmida yoser mikulam. I learn most from my students. What kind of an even crazy statement is that? How can you learn most from your students? They're your students. They're not your teachers. So how can you learn more from them? So the answer is you don't learn more from them. You learn more from yourself because of their confusion and your inability to explain yourself. So because they didn't understand what you were saying, you needed to go into the depths of your own soul in order to make it clearer to them. And that's what it means I learn more from my students because of the Or Choser. You got to go deep, deep, deep in to find out what you really got, because a true Chacham can actually explain himself on any level, right? And you don't realize you're true Chacham until you're trying to explain yourself to the lowest level. And so this is the idea of this notion of jealousy, right? It's like, you're good, you could just serve Hashem. And also when you see this other guy, you're like, whoa, I didn't even know such a thing existed. Does it exist in me? Right? And so all of a sudden it makes you go the other direction and find hidden powers in yourself in order to get to this thing that's reflected from you from the outside. If you were just going on your way without the outside world and this crazy Leah, finding some levels of divine service I never knew existed, Rachel would have been fine with just her own Or Yashar. But when it reflects back onto something and she sees what could be of her, this makes her go much, much deeper inside. It's called jealousy in a positive sense. And it reaches to the highest heights. And that is jealousy in the realm of holiness. It's only when you desire the good, right? This positive jealousy. But if your goal is not the actual, precious means that the person separates himself from TV and all the schmutz of the world, and he's pure, he eats only the highest levels of kashrus, and he makes sure he doesn't go around anything tumadik, right? So if your interest is truly the purity, you long for the purity, right? But right, so then it's the positive thing because you're actually looking for the godliness. But when you merely are jealous of your friend, lama hu omed b'maylo madregazu machmazeh hu soneo. So see, it's very subtle. You can fool yourself to think that it's holy jealousy. But if you're really only jealous because you see when this guy's purity and this guy's Talmid Chachamness and this guy's right, like has put him in a position of power and respect, and you just want the power and respect. You don't really want the purity. You don't really want those qualities. You're just annoyed that his yeshus is seemingly taking up more space than yours. Then instead of being jealous, like in other words, Rachel didn't hate Leah, right? She loved her like crazy. It's just that and in fact, on the contrary, it stimulated her to be a better person. But in this case, when you just want what they have in terms of the externalities of it, you want the position that they've been able to create for themselves because of their true work, but you don't want the holiness, then you wind up hating that person. It creates a repulsion, not a bond. And mind you, that is a very, very, very horrible thing to feel. And the most difficult, that same level of like depths of the soul is affected, but not for reaching your innermost essence of your godly potential, which ultimately is hard to find, and it takes a lot of work and strenuous like need to sort of overcome things. But at the end of the day, you're revealing godliness. This, you just want what he has, you want what he has. So you're going deeper and deeper into your Midian like core of Yeshus, and there's no fixing it. It just gets worse and worse and worse until you read the Maimer. V'hainu mitzada Yeshus shelo. It all comes because of your Yeshus. V'lechein hu soneh dafke la'ovdei Hashem. And here, look at this. Because you chose not to be, a basketball player or an accountant. You chose to be a shtickle Torah student. So unfortunately, you're not perfect and you still have a yeshus. So now your hatred goes after specifically those who are serving God. See how this it becomes like a very tricky thing to be in yeshiva. Because if you're not in it for the right reasons, now congratulations. Instead of hating this guy because he's 7 inches taller and can dunk a basketball, you hate the guy because he knows how to learn chitas. Right? And like your yeshus expresses itself on those who serve God, because that's the forum that you put yourself into. Your yeshus gets to express itself. Right? So nedavke ba'ovdei Hashem v'yirav ahavaso, and they fear him and they love him, v'yischabruso lanashim pashutim dafka. Right? And therefore, what do? You go and bind yourself with simple people. Because basically, as we just got through saying, you can't bond with the great rabbis and the great servants of God, because you hate them, right? Because you want what they have for the wrong reasons, and therefore you can't really sit and unite with them. So you sort of banish them from you. So you can't be by yourself. You also can't cough up the truth is that why you hate them is because of your own arrogance. You don't want to see yourself as hating people for no reason. So you go and you bind yourself with other people. You have to have someone that you have to pretend to yourself that you're a person who loves people and has Avas Yisrael. And so you go and you dafka hang around people who are simple in the ways of Avodas Hashem, because they don't challenge your feeling of self. Like they could be even lower than you. So your yeshus can sort of get away feeling good about itself because you're hanging around with people who are not really threatening you. And you can fool yourself basically. That why am I hanging around with lowly people? It's because I'm humble. That's why I hang out with the people who are on the basic level. It's not true. It's really because you can't hang around with higher level people, higher frequency people, because it bothers you that they're in such a state, and you want to banish them from this notion of sinas chinam. So the only people that you can really hang around are the people that don't threaten you, and therefore, and you justify that. Look, and even that you're like, look at what a mensch I am. I hang out with the simple guys. It's crazy. It's like he knows mamash the recesses of the person's yetzer hara. Liyoso michlal ovdei Hashem. And since you're you're not in the basketball team, you're not in the law firm, you're in the yeshiva, and therefore, since you put yourself into the lot of those who serve God, Therefore, your hatred is specifically for those who have held some kind of a level in their divine service. Because in your particular tchum and category of life that you've chosen, those are the ones who are threatening your sense of self, right? So it's very dangerous, basically, to take this road, because your natural inborn hatred winds up showing up in the worst place, right? Other people don't really hate Talmud scholars in the same way. You, Dafka, hate Talmud scholars because you want to be one. And again, if you really wanted to be one and that was your ultimate goal, that you really want this knowledge, then the jealousy is a positive thing. That piercing need to achieve it will actually aid you in coming higher and higher. But if it's just that you want to sit at the head of the table or whatever it is, and that's what you're jealous of, you're in a very dangerous situation, because your hatred is now going to express itself on people who are set up to serve Hashem with their lives. But simple guys who are not holding in any particular level, them you love, because you know you have to love a Jew, and right, you can't get away from it. So in on one level, there's like two levels of depths of how low you could fall in this particular area. And he says, one is when you hang around, you can't hang around with like the real scholars, because we explained why. So you hang around with simple people, but you actually like them. You love them, and like those are your friends. He says, but it could be worse than that. That the reason that you're loving them and getting close to them is because on them you can really show off, because they're lowly, and you can be the rabbi, right? Shamis Pashat Yeshu. So there you can sort of like, have yourself praiseworthy, and like all the honor that you wish you had from being like in a higher status, you can at least get here. So even your connection with those people is from really like foul reasons, right? Because they'll honor you. And they're gonna see your words as precious, like, wow, you're the chacham. Okay, so all pretty devastating words to hear first thing in the morning. Let's keep going. Hine kol devarim hanal. All these things we just spoke about, some people might be like ringing all the bells in their head, and some people are like, dude, I don't feel that. Yesh shehem begasus bedakus. Kol echad lefi ma'alasu midregasu ba'avoda. So these things, this level of midyan inside of us, it's not equal to all, right? Some people have it more, and some people have it less, and each one in accordance with their level of avoda. Ad sheyechol lios bedakus kol kach. But he's saying, but don't think you're free of it, right? It could be so refined, sheinu margish osam ba'atzma. You don't even feel the midyan inside of you, and that's somewhat dangerous. He's like, let me tell you, and that's why it's called HeChaltzu, right? Arm yourselves, my friends. If you didn't have it at all, you'd probably be Mashiach, right? In other words, you have it. That's what he's saying here. This is like the declaration that even if you don't feel it in yourself, you're not aware of your own baseless hatred, it's sitting in there. You have to know that you got to look for it then, right? Because it's sitting there, and it is getting in the way of your divine service. You might have read up till here, and all these words of burning coals, you'll be like, nah, not me, man. Right? I don't relate to any of that. It's very interesting. I'm sorry for all of you people, but I don't really relate to that. But she says, no, in truth, you're in there. You're part of this problem. We've already established that this is the worst possible trait that a person can have, much worse than any particular line of Yetzer Hara from the other side. Remember, we said in the beginning of the class, we spent like weeks on this idea that Midian represents the klal of Tohu, right? The basic common denominator of all evil. Whereas then that can then filter into a particular flavor of evil, right? That you can then be, have a problem particularly with the Yetzer Hara from Chesed, or the Yetzer Hara from Gevura, right? Which is basically lust or anger. So those are all bad things. But all of those are just little pieces, and like an emanation from the core and source of all bad things, which is arrogance, which is basically an overinflated sense of self. The only reason you have lust is because your overinflated sense of self is channeling into that. Or the only reason you have anger is because your overinflated sense of self is channeling to that. But beyond all of them, and he's saying every single person has this problem at some level, is just your overinflated sense of self, your yesh. And it's the klal, the principle of all bad deeds, traits. Ufrat einu dome leklal. As we said, like the detail has no resemblance to the klal, to the principle. She'einu b'tokiv kol kach, right? And I was trying to give that off because it's not nearly as strong. When you're going to filter it into one flavor, right? It's almost like you take like a prism. It's like blue, red, yellow, green. Well, none of that is like as powerful as just all of them together, the powerful just white light shining at you, right? Because it's all a breakdown ray of the original. So none of your bad traits are as bad as this one. The gam liyosa rak prat levad, and since any of the detail expressions of Yetzer Hara, since it's just a detail, and the thing is, if you're someone, so to speak, who's angry all the time, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to leak over into your being someone who has lusts for things, because it's contracted itself into a specific bad trait, which means the specific bad traits won't necessarily leak into another one. Not so when you have sinas chinam, shu klal hakol klal sitra achra. It's the principle which contains the entire sitra achra. It's 31 flavors. You just got the Baskin Robbins. You got all the bad traits inside of there in potential. Shu inyan apirur v'yischalkus, which is the notion of separation. This is what the trait is, just the need to separate. And again, not the holy type of separation where you're separating one thing in order to find all its interconnected parts, but you're actually just trying to make one thing into two and leave them separated. Hu makar v'sibas kol hamidos raus. It's the source of all bad habits, all bad traits. And this is what we're saying before in the Maimer. This is, by the way, Baruch Hashem, we're getting to like the sort of a sort of level of conclusion here from the beginning paragraphs. This is what opposes the general name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud Kei Vav Kei is all about Yud Kei Vav Kei as one word, right? If you start to put the Yud over here and the Hey over here, and then you've lost you don't have a Kli for God anymore. So we're saying before, this guy's like running around with his beams of the Mishkan, and this guy's running around with his curtains, and this one's got, the menorah, and over there you got the showbread, but they don't come together. You don't have a Mishkan. You're just carrying heavy things, right? So it's only when you bring them all together and like all of a sudden you spell the divine name, that's when there's Kedusha. That's when there's a portal from infinity to be able to rest in this world, because you've created a bittul, right? But when you're holding out your ground and you're staying in a state of separateness, you've just made a blemish in the Shem Havaya. You're blocking God from coming into this world and your world. Therefore, anyone who has like feeling for their own soul, you don't want yourself to be inside of the klippas and the other side, and you don't want to fall into all these terrible attributes and traits. You want to just go doing your work as it needs to be. And you want to continue to refine and elevate your natural midos. Like we said, a person is born an animal, and you want to just keep on refining it, become a holy servant of God. So he's kind of bringing together here a little bit of Tishrei and Nisan all at once, right? The idea of like, you have to search out your evil. This is that notion of the Cheshbon HaNefesh that's very synonymous with the avodah of Elul, right? That Rosh Hashanah is coming, right? And you have 40 days to basically, before Yom Kippur, you have to search out and do a proper cheshbon on all your thoughts, speech, and action. The main thing is to find and identify where your yeshus is, where your jealousies are, right? Where your sinas chinam is, because really, as soon as you shine the light on it and you realize it, you don't continue it. It really weakens it incredibly when you fess up and you're like, wow, this whole relationship issue is pushed on me. This is my bad, right? I am arrogant and I recognize it, and that is already basically, you've just like killed the enemy just by knowing it. So you have to look for it. You think this doesn't apply to yourself, you're wrong. And therefore you have to look for it. And then why is it bringing Pesach? Because he says, how do you look for it? Just like you're searching for your chametz, right? You got to take this light of the candle, which is the candle of your soul, which is like your only friend, right? Who's actually looking for light and truth. And you have to go into all the cracks and crevices. Seek your life out. Look at your relationships. Look at your relationship with your parents and with your friends and with your colleagues and with your teachers and with your students and everybody, right? Your relationship, your wife, your children. And you got to look at where it's holding and why and where's the holdups and come together. Livdok b'chora v'sdakim, like it says by Pesach, you have to search the cracks and crevices. Limtzo kol chelki prati hara, find all that chametz, all that leaven, all that yeshus. Shehem amonimos u'ma'avoda amisis, that's what's holding you back from doing true service to Hashem. Ve'einu mevaru mezachek midosav, because you're just not refining yourself, you're not doing the work. Levaram lagamri menafsho, burn them up, get them out of your soul. V'az yelech lebetach darcho, then you'll be a happy person. You'll go trustfully on your way. Ba'avoda b'tefillah, davening with a bittul, v'zicha midos v'kiyam Torah mitzvahs, all in the way it should be. V'zeu inyan klippas midyan. Right, we'll start with Yud Zayin tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem. This is the clip of Midyan.